Tennessee with a huge commitment, a monster commitment. Tell us about what the Vols picked up, and it's no surprise he happens to be a highly rated wide receiver.
Yes, Travis Smith Jr. commits to Tennessee, a 4-star across the board out of Atlanta. He picks Tennessee over Alabama, Auburn, and Georgia. This is a huge pickup for a few reasons. For those who don't know the way Tennessee is structured right now at receiver, I can tell you this up front. I don't even need sources to tell you this. Tennessee didn't offer this guy a lot of NIL cash. They don't have to. Is that fair to say, Dave?
Yes.
They don't have to offer NIL cash. So they're not beating Georgia, Alabama, and Auburn on NIL money. They're not beating.
Let me say one thing. As much NIL cash. Nobody's getting things done without some form of payment, right?
Correct. But they're not going to beat Georgia, Alabama, and Auburn on that.
You don't have to Nico him. You don't have to drop $2 million in his lap.
Right. They're not going to beat Georgia in location. He's from Atlanta. Obviously, Georgia's closer. They're not going to beat Georgia in program prestige. Georgia's won 2 of the last 3 national titles and was probably the most talented team last year. They're not even going to beat Georgia in terms of selling playing time. I think it's easier for a receiver to get on the field right now at Georgia than it is for Tennessee, given how deep they are. And amidst all of that, he still chose to go to Tennessee. Dave, the Heupel discount is in full swing for wide receivers at Tennessee right now. That's what this is. Wide receivers are falling over to get to Tennessee because of how much work and success Josh Heupel, Joey Halsley, before that Alex Golesh, and yes, Kelsey Pope, the current receivers coach, have had with the Vols. That Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt success from 2021 to 2022 has had such an impact now that I think that Tennessee is just going to be a factory for weapons going forward. And this is just another part of that.
I believe that Smith, for all, and you stole my thunder, but for all the reasons, you stole my thunder in the column too. That's really good on offthehooksports.com. And I encourage you to check it out. Shameless plug of ourselves. I think it's the most significant pickup that Tennessee has in their upcoming class that's not named George McIntyre. And I think you could argue that he's bigger than McIntyre. I will take McIntyre because he's a quarterback. And theoretically with Merklinger, you have another quarterback that is the heir apparent Nico. You and I have our doubts. We'll see. But that's significant. And he's one of the highest rated. So I don't want to just fluff off and say, just George McIntyre. Let's make this easy. And just say Travis Smith so we can get some clicks. No, I'm not going to do that. But I think Travis Smith is as big as George McIntyre. We're talking about similarly ranked guys. I think he's as big as offensive tackle Douglas Utu. I think he's as big as defensive lineman Marion Dye, defensive lineman Ethan Utley. Those are the 4-star guys that are rated ahead of him, according to GoVols 24/7 composite. All 4-star guys. But everything you said, going into Atlanta, Georgia, and getting this type of kid because of something that isn't NIL cash, because of all the reasons you listed, I'm not going to rehash them. I think this is as significant as any commitment that Tennessee has gotten in its class. And I will go so far as to say this could be the type of commitment. Tennessee's really good now, right, Caleb? But they're not elite. They're not championship contender level proven yet. You think they will be this year, but they're not proven yet. They still need that influx from Atlanta. This could be the type of guy that we look back on like we did in the 1998 team and said, oh, that's your Deion Grant, that's your Jamal Lewis, that's your Cozy Coleman, because he was willing to be the first to take a jump. Don't think that Georgia is so hot in recruiting they can't be beat right now for a couple of reasons. They're not going to give as much NIL money because they don't have to. There's issues on the roads that bothers parents. And I think Kirby Smart's one of those guys that you've really got to like to play for. You got to like to play for that style. A lot of people aren't. So where would you rank Smith's commitment among the others that Tennessee had picked up?
As far as level of impressiveness in terms of a pickup, you're right. He's number one. This is the most impressive pickup Tennessee's had among everybody they've picked up this year. I mean, I can honestly say that. Y'all can think I'm crazy, but the closest one is Trey Podiat because he's from Wisconsin. Luke Fickell's a defensive backs coach, so it's a kind of a good situation there. Tennessee has questions about defensive back, so that was pretty impressive. But actual impressiveness of just landing talent, this isn't even a question. Travis Smith is the most impressive one. To get a guy from Atlanta out of Georgia when it's not like you had exterior factors to give you an advantage between playing time, NIL, program prestige. Like in the 90s, you at least had program prestige. It's shocking that Heupel got this guy, and it speaks to a level of recruiting ability that many of us, myself included, didn't think Josh Heupel had. I never saw Josh Heupel as much of a recruiter, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I saw him more as a ball coach who could recruit. And, there's a difference, Dave, right, between the two?
Yeah, I mean, there's a big difference. Steve Spurrier, I can name other guys that have won it with that type of approach, certainly. And to be honest with you, somewhat more exciting. Do you remember how boring those Alabama teams were that relied just on recruiting and running the ball and defense? And they almost blew a lot of second half leads. So, yeah, if I had to choose between the two, great recruiter, good coach, or good recruiter, great coach, I would probably go with the latter.
I would too, because quite honestly, the recruiting ability, there's kind of a ceiling that you all hit. And then at that point, the success is based on the program you're at, right? And just the time and place more than it is.
It's also based off just a check. I mean, nowadays with NIL, it negates recruiting in a couple of different ways. It negates it in terms of its importance, and it negates it in terms of its long-term ability to look at a program because of transfers and say they're more talented than another program. So, yeah, the game's changed.
A lot. It's changed significantly. Now, I want to break this down real quick with Travis Smith, because just real quick before we end this topic, I looked at some of his highlights, Dave, and this is underrated, but Travis Smith consistently accelerated past the secondary on all of his catches, and a lot of them were short routes and things like that. I wouldn't look into – you see receivers do that all the time in high school highlights, and I almost never look into it because it's high school. It's their level of competition. But if they're doing that in Atlanta and that Georgia competition, it's legit, right? If they're doing it against that competition, they're going to do it in the SEC, aren't they?
You've stole everything from me today. All of my takes. Yes. If you had said a guy looks like he's accelerating and played in Idaho, I would have had a much different response. But Westlake plays a really good competition. So if you're showing out there at Westlake, you're doing a great job for yourself. Portions of the program brought to you by our good friends at Medicare Misty, whether it's you or your parents, perhaps, that need a little bit of, Medicare assistance that's free. Medicare Misty.